What would it take to leave everything you know behind and embark on a journey to the unknown? For Henry Arbeiter Sr., that journey led him from the heart of Germany to the banks of the Mississippi River in southern Illinois. He faced a land of both immense opportunity and daunting challenges. Join us as we uncover the story of his American dream.
Henry Sr. came down from Horse Prairie, which is around Redbud, and that's where he met Caroline. And they got married, and he bought that property down there in the Bottoms, in the Gorham area. The Bottoms is about 20,000 acres from bluff to bluff, north and south, and east and west. It's sort of like a bowl, and so a lot of the water stayed in that area, and then they had to drain that. And they dredged it with it had to be a gigantic drag line on a barge. And apparently they started at the river and went northeast into the lake, dredging the ditch to 20 or 30 foot deep, and then putting the spoils on both sides to make the berm. Apparently that was the only land available at that time for the price. I think it was $1 an acre. And a lot of the other ground, the better ground, was already bought up by that time. Speculators or settlers. But most of this ground had trees, forest on it, and had low spots. And so, not sure why he picked that. I wish it was central Illinois. We wouldn't have to put up the Mississippi River. Lower ground was woods, the higher ground maybe wasn't. It's pretty level, but you do have lower area where the water settles, and that's why those ditches were dug down there in the Bottoms to drain that river ground to get the water back out to the Mississippi. And that big ditch called the Big Lake Ditch, that was dredged in 1904, and that drained the whole lake. The pump is on the Big Lake Ditch. That big ditch, that's the one that drained the lake water out of the lake, and the lake is the lowest part of the Bottoms. Marshy, yes, but they had to go through a lot of ridges. They didn't really dredge it. They dug the ditch. That was a new ditch. That wasn't a natural drain. The natural drain of that Bottoms was the mill ditch, which you see next to Otto and Irma's place, that snakes around their place and goes past Homer. That's called mill ditch. And that was the natural drain of the Bottoms before they dug the Big Lake Ditch. And I always asked Dad, why do they call it the mill ditch, and why did it always run? He said it was natural drain, and so since the water was always draining through that ditch, they put a grist mill, and that was down by Homer or Henry Arbeiter's home place where Homer and Evelyn lived. That was the mill there with a grist mill because water was always running. Well, Dad said there were so many trees on the property that they dropped the trees and then used a sawmill to saw the wood up, and that's how they built the homes, and that's how they definitely built the barns. Some of the homes were bought, lumber from the lumber yard, but the earlier ones were made from the lumber off the farm. And like the barn and the machine shed on Mom and Dad's place, that was from the trees that are on the farm itself. And then you had the stumps left. And then during the winter time, Dad said that's where they spent most of their time out, grubbing those stumps out, trying to dig them out, having mules and horses with chains and pulling them out. And then if you couldn't get them out, you just had to go around them for years until they rotted. And then towards the 60s, when they start digging the ditch on the east side, they had to go through a wooded area, and that's when they used dynamite. And they would drill down into the stump, put the dynamite down in there and say, fire in the hole, and then it would blow up and then blow those stump chunks everywhere, hundreds of feet in the air, and then hundreds of feet to the side, and that's what you all had to pick up. That's what we spent all winter when I was a kid, picking those chunks up. Grandpa had his own sawmill down there. Plus, there were gentlemen that would take it to their sawmill and saw it, and then they would have to bring it back and dry it, put it in the barn or the sheds, and put sheaves between them, just like you see drying the wood at the big sawmills. One machine shed that Dad had there was made out of all pecan logs, because at one time there were over 200 pecan trees on the farm. Henry Sr., he was the one that bought all the ground, married Karolina, and then he had
9 children. Henry Jr. and Lucy had 8 children, and one as an infant passed away, and her name was Linda, on that farm of 92 acres.
And Dad was the oldest son, and since Henry Jr. died so young, when he was 57, Dad had to sort of take over his farm and his own farm. And then when Homer, Clarence, and Victor, they were quite young at that time. They got a little older, then they helped farming.
Victor and Clarence working on the farm and hot summer days and that, be working out in the fields. They would sneak up to the bluff there where Mr. Lundy had the swimming pool up there, and they would go in and get a quick swim and cool off, and then get back out to the team and that out in the field.
And Homer decided he wanted to farm the home place, and then Victor and Clarence got to the age of after high school, and they got jobs in Evansville, Indiana. That's how they moved away from the farm and ended up over there.
After Victor and Clarence both moved to Evansville to find different jobs, Homer was still left on the farm, and he took over all of the farming. Grandma and Grandpa lived with him in the house, and he farmed the home place there until 1993, when they moved to Murfreesboro, and Edward farmed with him, and during that time, Otto farmed his farm, and he farmed 200 other acres, and then Otto went in with Willard. Willard started farming when he was 17, and he bought a farm and bought his own machinery and farmed with Dad until 1978. And in 1978, Dad said he needed more help. And that's when I quit teaching and come down to the farm and start farming with Dad. Farmed Dad's farm and plus 2 other farms. Meanwhile, Willard was getting larger and larger with his farming, and he ended up farming 67 years, continuous years, Willard did, until 3 years before he passed. Dad passed away in 1985, still farming until 3 days before he passed away. Then I took over full time, and I farmed for 42 years. I decided to retire after Willard did in 2020, and I sold both of the farms, the home place and Grandma and Grandpa's place, to Mark, Willard's 4th son, who took over the farm, bought the farm, and right now he's farming thousands of acres himself with his 2 brothers, Jeff and Bob. We met first at the church, and then we met at Bottoms Up and had lunch and talking about the heritage of our ancestors, how they came here, how they settled the two farms. And we had such a good time.